What is the 501h election? Is this something your nonprofit should do? And how does an organization make the 501h election? Let's talk about it. The 501h election refers to Section 501h of the Internal Revenue Code, which provides an optional way of measuring the amount of lobbying activities that a 501c3 public charity may carry out. While an in-depth explanation of these rules is beyond the scope of this video, just know that 501c3 public charities are permitted to influence the process of making legislation by engaging in lobbying. But there are limits because under the tax code, lobbying cannot be a substantial part of a 501c3 public charity's activities. This is in contrast to other types of tax-exempt organizations like 501c4 or 501c6 organizations, which are not subject to lobbying limits. It's also in contrast to 501c3 private foundations, which are not allowed to lobby at all. For tax exemption purposes, lobbying includes both direct lobbying, which covers certain communications with legislators and their staffers, as well as grassroots lobbying, which covers certain communications aimed at influencing the general public. It's important not to confuse lobbying activities with political campaign activities, which generally means supporting or opposing candidates for public office. Lobbying activities are permitted, subject to limits, and political campaign activities are not permitted at all for 501c3 organizations. What the 501h election does is permit a 501c3 public charity to measure its lobbying limits based only on expenditures, how much money is spent on or allocated to lobbying activities. In the absence of the 501h election, when applying the no substantial part test, the IRS will look at a variety of factors besides just money spent. This could include time spent by volunteers on lobbying efforts, the relative importance of a lobbying effort to an organization, or the organization's overall influence on a particular issue. With the 501h election, none of these non-monetary factors are taken into account. This is generally helpful because many forms of lobbying do not involve a lot of expense. For example, doing grassroots lobbying through posts on social media. The 501h election also comes with detailed regulations that have more precise exceptions and definitions. This provides a lot more certainty about whether a particular communication counts as lobbying, and most organizations consider this a good thing. And by the nature of the 501h expenditure test, you're going to have a better sense of whether the organization is at risk of exceeding the limits, which means you're a lot less likely to be surprised with a revocation of tax-exempt status. The 501h lobbying expenditure limits are applied on a sliding scale and are generally between 5% and 20% of the organization's total lobbying and non-lobbying expenditures, as you can see by taking a look at the Form 990 Schedule C. Keep in mind, however, that grassroots lobbying activities are subject to separate smaller limits, which can be no more than 25% of the organization's overall total lobbying expenditure limit. Also keep in mind that under Section 501h, there's a total cap of $1 million in total lobbying expenditures and $250,000 in grassroots lobbying expenditures. For this reason, some very large organizations decide that they're better off under the more ambiguous no substantial part test and opt not to make the 501h election. But for most other small, medium-sized, and even some large 501c3 organizations, the 501h election usually makes a lot of sense. Lastly, if you want to make the 501h election, the way to do it is to use IRS Form 5768. This form must be mailed to the IRS before the end of the tax year in which you want the election to take effect. That should do it for today. For more information, visit the website at SE4nonprofits.com. See you next time.